Hi everyone, I'm Anna. I'm here today with Erika, who is currently a senior in aerospace engineering at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she's here to talk to us about her previous experiences in aerospace engineering. So to get started, Erika, could you give me a quick introduction of yourself? This could include your name, your current or past involvements, and just a quick description of what you do in aerospace engineering.
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. My name is Erika Jarosch. I'm a senior in aerospace engineering, studying at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. In the past, I've had a couple job experiences, so internships over the summer. My first job experience in the aerospace field was actually with Collins Aerospace, and I was a systems engineering co-op, which means that I took off a semester of school and continued into the summer. So overall, I had about 8 months working as a systems engineer on the mission flight management software system. So that was a really cool experience. It opened up a lot of opportunities for me. I think also one of the things you'll find from job experiences is sometimes it teaches you what you don't want to do, and that's just as valuable. So that led me to an internship this past summer at SpaceX as a satellite operations and automations intern. And that was a really cool, exciting career path. So I recommend aerospace just because it's really cool, especially like the rocket side.
And you already mentioned that you're majoring in aerospace engineering. So I guess, is there anything specific within aerospace engineering that you want to work with or that you've learned in the past 4 years that really inspired you?
Yeah, I think specifically in aerospace, I'm starting to gear more towards structures and fluids. Going into the AE field, all I really knew is that I thought space was cool, like astronomy was interesting, but I wasn't that mechanically minded until I got to college. I think studying at U of I really like opens up your brain to understand physics and math a lot better. You take a lot of really intense calculus and physics classes, which I kind of failed when I was in high school. But when I got here, it was like relearning it. It helped open up the field and make it more accessible for me. So I've had experience with like software systems, but some of the classes I took were things I didn't even know were parts of aerospace when I first got into U of I as a freshman. So that's things like incompressible and compressible flow, and then hypersonic aircrafts. And those are like things I think I'm more interested in for the future.
So my next question was going to be what your professional involvements have been, but since you already talked about those, do you kind of want to talk about the differences between working at Collins and then working at SpaceX?
I would say traditionally in the aerospace field, one of the like defining factors for companies is whether it's kind of like old wave aerospace or new wave. And there's like pros and cons to both, but that's just kind of how I've heard it discussed. So kind of older, more well-established companies are like really big, kind of like Collins Aerospace or Boeing, maybe a little bit even NASA, like they just have a long established history. But they also tend to be more like systems engineering based, which sometimes means slower process, but it also means like a better defined process. So that was a really unique experience because you're not using a majority of your time engineering, you're using a majority of your time like designing and setting up design principles and communicating with teammates, which is important across the board. And then I think it's a little bit slower paced, and sometimes it's a little bit more like government involved too, which can contribute to that slower pace / systems engineering mindset. And then I think working at SpaceX was more on the side of like that new wave, like new age kind of approach to space design. So that's like your companies like SpaceX or Rocket Lab or Blue Origin. And those are like shifting more towards rapid design iteration, which means that like there's not as big a focus on establishing something like super safe over a 10-year period and having a lot of design reviews. It's a lot of like, we're going to blow this up 12 times to see what works and what doesn't. And so it's like a lot faster paced. I think I also at SpaceX felt that there was more value for my individual contributions. So as an intern at like these new spaces, you get a lot more responsibility to design and create and communicate between the teams. So yeah, lots of pros and cons between both.
And then I guess my next question would be, how were your experiences getting those internships? Like what worked, what didn't work, things like that?
I would say, yeah, internships are like a big buzzword, especially when you get into college. I'd heard of them in high school, but like I'd never really been open to it. I worked at a boutique in high school for a long time. Like it wasn't really like I had any engineering experience. Overall, my experience with internships has been you hit the ground running and you just apply, and it feels kind of like numbing because you just have to keep applying yourself and getting these rejections and you have to keep going. And I had one friend actually who would like freshman and sophomore year, he'd say for every rejection he got, he'd apply to 4 more companies that day. And I thought like that was kind of it sounds a little drastic, but like that's the mindset you have to have, is kind of just understanding that if things don't pan out, you'll be fine. But applying yourself is kind of what's really important for the process, because you never know what's going to go through. I've had people who get picked out of the internship application online get internships, or people who've like reached out on LinkedIn to different recruiters get internships. Sometimes it's a toss up. So I think overall it's like, in my experience, I've learned not to take rejection personally, but just to know that there's thousands of really qualified candidates applying for those jobs. And so sometimes it's hard to stand out. But I think taking leadership opportunities and then taking advantage of as many networking opportunities as you can while you're on campus is super important to like stand out to recruiters.
Definitely. And I know you're really involved with the Illinois Space Society at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So are there any experiences you want to talk about from that you think helped get the internships or anything along those lines?
Yes, I do. Illinois Space Society is like what I attribute all of my successes to. I think when you go to college, and my pitch for U of I to like incoming undergrads and then also just underclassmen is always that I think there's a really unique opportunity here for students who are willing to make the most of whatever experiences are available. So it's kind of like you take groundwork that's been set up, whether that's like research or RSOs or like baseline opportunities, but then like it's up to you to kind of get benefits out of that, if that makes sense. So like, for example, ISS, like it's just an RSO and you build things, but like you can make it something incredible enough to get an internship at SpaceX by senior year. I think like my involvement on exec and then the different technical projects has been really important for that. So like for me, I was super involved in tech projects my freshman and sophomore year. I knew nothing about engineering. I joined the avionics team for like our space grant rocketry competition because I didn't know what the word avionics meant. And that's like how far out of the loop I was from the world of aerospace when I arrived here. But you learn a lot. And I think like, as long as you keep showing up and keep advocating for yourself to get work and to learn and research, you can get a lot out of the experiences on campus. And then I think throughout more of my time, I ended up doing more like executive board positions, but that was also really cool because you get to stay in contact with like a lot more members of the society and help uplift them and get them jobs and stuff. So yeah, I was president last year and then like vice president in the past.
I was in the same boat as you. I had just worked at a Dairy Queen when I came here.
Right. And you're like, who's gonna hire me for like engine design if you're sweeping floors? But
yeah, and I feel like that's a really big misconception people have when they come here. At least I did when I came. I was like, oh, I don't have nearly as much experience as these other people coming in, so it's going to make it way harder. But obviously you're a great example of someone who came in with like little experience and now you've interned at SpaceX.
Yeah, and which is like kind of fun. But that was one of the things I wanted to talk about real quick. Is I remember my freshman year during like my exec interview actually for ISS, the president was interviewing me and she asked if I had any questions or like what made me stand out. And I was like, I'm really passionate about space, but I'm low-key extremely worried that I'm not the person who like knows all the different engine names and like can tell you what kind of plane is flying overhead. And she was like, okay, first of all, it's your passion that's going to make a difference. So like how excited you are to learn about those things, not how much you already know. And then second of all, she was like, most people are making it up as they go. So like, I think a big, I don't know if you guys want to touch on like imposter syndrome in this interview, but part of it is just like, yeah, okay. So I would say like, part of that is to understand that people aren't just making it up, but it's like, they probably just watched a video or just read something about that. And it doesn't need to intimidate you. I think when people like have a lot of technical knowledge, you can just ask them questions and learn for it yourself, but staying like more impressed by your peers instead of intimidated is kind of important, I think, to like feel good about where you're at.
I guess another question I have, and I know this is something that's changed a lot for me over the years. So like, obviously when you came here, you had your reasons for wanting to be in aerospace engineering. And I was wondering how much have those changed over the 4 years of undergrad?
A ton. Yeah, definitely. I think I mentioned it a little bit before. It seems like we were kind of on like a similar page where I knew that engineering was probably for me because I was like decent at math and I was always drawn to science and I always wanted to be an inventor. And that was kind of like the baseline I had for a career, but it wasn't well sculpted. And I remember like my senior year of high school, I was pretty involved in Science Olympiad and I got assigned to the astronomy team. And then I just remember during college app season, I was like, stars have been cool to look at. Aerospace sounds interesting. I'll just do that. I had no idea what it meant. I ended up like reading about SpaceX actually, which is what inspired me to apply, which is kind of funny because I never imagined I would work there. I was just like, yeah, it's just really cool. Like I'd love to learn about it. So I think like aerospace to me, I was motivated to get into it just because I thought it would be cool to learn about. I didn't really know much about it at all. And now for me, it's way more about like holistic growth. So I feel like I've learned a lot of technical skills, but also being a part of like this undergraduate degree community and specifically the Illinois Space Society has like promoted a lot of leadership in myself that I never ever knew that I had until I just like started taking those opportunities. So I think like an engineering degree, and then in our cases, an aerospace engineering degree can really help you learn more about yourself and how you fit into the world, not just like what career you'll pursue, but I don't know, how you'll interact with teammates and what kind of jobs you'll prefer.
Yeah, that's such an amazing answer. I think we've talked a lot about like obviously there are a lot of highlights to our field in terms of like teamwork and everything like that. But kind of shifting gears a little bit, are there any issues or any like sort of bad experiences you've had in your field that you want to talk about and kind of like how you got through them?
Sure. I think probably a pretty classic one is being a gender minority in engineering. That's something that's like always a very tough thing to tackle. I think what I found in college is like there's minor experiences, but I think what's most important is when you're faced with them is to like stand up for yourself in the same way that you would stand up for anybody else being like bullied or subjugated. So yeah, this is like kind of a difficult concept to tackle. I kind of dove into this one. I guess I would say for like my experiences being a woman in aerospace have probably where I find the most difficulties, specifically on like technical project teams trying to advocate for your research or your design decisions. I know historically we kind of have issues on exec or with leadership, like learning how to make sure that everyone on a team feels welcomed and included. So I guess overall for that, like not knowing that you deserve space is like the baseline for it. Like you deserve to be there and there's no one who can tell you you can't be or you shouldn't be. And then advocating for yourself and others to like inhabit that space is I think really important. So continuously to be like, I do belong here actually, even if your design ends up being wrong, like at least it was wrong for the engineering purpose, you know, but like you should always be listened to. I think I've learned a lot over the past 4 years about like how to advocate for myself and like belonging.
So I guess kind of moving to like wrapping things up. Obviously you're a senior in college right now and you have a lot of options going forward. Do you have, this is a hard question, but do you have any idea of what you want to be doing next year or anything like that?
Yeah, so I have one more semester left after my senior year, which I think is another fun little exploration into non-traditional college successes where it like these programs are designed for 4 years, but sometimes they take a little longer. And I think that's pretty like pretty normal. So that's another thing that I wouldn't be afraid of is like all of these daunting classes, like you have plenty of time to complete the degree.
Is if you could go back and talk to yourself as either a college freshman or maybe a high school senior, what advice would you give yourself?
Okay, I love this little mantra. But my number one advice, especially for women in aerospace, but for anybody who's like feeling really intimidated or maybe not even unwelcomed, but just like unconfident in themselves, my biggest advice is just show up. I think that's how I ended up being so ingrained in ISS culture and like a part of the aerospace community and meeting people was like, even if I didn't feel qualified, you don't have to be qualified, just show up. So like to all these different technical project meetings or social events or professional networking events, like no matter how scared you are, as long as you get yourself there, like your feet are in the door, you can stand in the corner the whole time, but like being there, I think is a really important step. And something my mom used to tell me when I was super stressed out about like applications or writing essays or turning in homework, is she'd be like, make peace in your mind to turn in the worst essay you can, or like the worst homework you could. But like, as long as you do it, that's like a base. And then I think you get a lot of your anxieties out just by like showing up, getting it done. And then you can like focus on refining the process or like becoming a better engineer, that kind of thing. So just show up. That's my spiel.